Good morning, everyone. I'm Erin Livingston. I work here at HGAC. Thank you so much for joining us in person and online. For those of you in the room, if you didn't yet sign in, it's in the back. We got donuts and coffee and water for you. And if you need to, I know some of you have already found the restroom, but if you need to find it, it's past the elevators and to your right. Let's see. If you are online and you're watching with multiple people in the room, please go ahead and type in all of your names into the chat just so we can accurately capture everybody that is in attendance this morning. And for everybody, you can ask questions at any time during the workshop this morning. For those online, just type them in the chat. We will be monitoring and ask those for you. And for those of you in the room, you can raise your hand and then use the mic in front of you. That way everybody online can also hear your question. So I think that is all I have, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tetra Tech, and they were going to introduce themselves and get us kicked off with this workshop this morning. So
thank you much. Thank you very much, Erin and Wendy and Cheryl. Appreciate y'all putting this on today. I want to do some quick introductions before we start into the actual, regular schedule here. But my name is John Burry, and is this thing working? Oh, it's okay. Okay, great. I'm sorry. My name is John Burry. I'm director of our post-disaster programs within Tetra Tech. I work out of our Houston office and have supported HGAC as well as communities around the state of Texas and nation for the last 20 plus years following disasters and planning for, responding to, and recovering from those events, and have been a part of this workshop series for many, many years, and am pleased to be invited back and pleased to have this opportunity here today. And with me here is Brian Rutherford and Nick Russo, also out of our Houston office. Brian assists with leads our debris management planning efforts, and he has done, Brian, how many debris plans have you done here in the state of Texas and across the nation?
About 65.
Okay, 65 debris management plans, and that's everybody from Los Angeles County which has 88 cities within its area and 10 million people, all the way down to communities in north central Texas and the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as well as here in the Houston area. And then also Nick Russo, he is also one of our senior directors here in our Houston office, and he's been our project manager for our Harris County debris program over the last several weeks following the derecho. So Nick, you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, Nick Russo, like he said, I do a lot of environmental disaster-related work, and I cover all of our, most of our projects in Texas.
All right, thank you so much, Nick. And Nick and I have, well, actually, this team, we've all worked and known each other for the last, 15 years or so. And so we're excited to be here today to talk about debris management planning. And thank you for all of almost 50 participants online, as well as we got a couple of dozen here, locally. So, and obviously we have just a quick bio and quick information. We have the exits here along each of the sides. We got donuts in the back, water. Restrooms are on the opposite side. We're going to take a couple of breaks. We've got 2 breaks scheduled here, 5-minute break or so, and then we'll get back to it. So we'll ask everybody, and then we'll end on time. So today's time is scheduled for 9 a.m. to noon. So that during those 3 hours, again, no topic is off limits when it comes to this workshop, with the exception of the webworms. Okay, we're not going to talk about webworms because I got them everywhere, and I saw Brian's pictures, and we're not talking about Astros bullpens. Okay, we're not going to talk about that today because the last 2 days have driven me nuts, and then we're not going to talk about the heat and traffic, because that's just part of living in Houston and living in Texas and the Gulf Coast. But other than that, we've got a lot of good information, and I think you're going to find it crosses a number of different areas. So we're going to go into some of the recent incidents that have hit the state of Texas and really have been issues not only here in the Houston-Galveston area, but across the state. We're going to be talking about what you can do now to plan for these debris operations. We're going to go into resources for residents and businesses. That's something that has been has appeared on the comment sheets in the past. And just so everybody knows, we do have feedback forms on the back of the table for those of you who are here in person. And then, Aaron, how are we going to do feedback for those participants who are? Okay, and so for those of you, again, thank you very much for being here online. We're going to have a feedback form that we will be sending you, going to be coming here from HGAC. So we really do review those. We really do look at how we are doing, the information presented, and then tips and ideas for other topics in the future. Again, 2 other topics, damage assessments and why that's important, and especially for debris and disaster declarations. And then finally, we're going to wrap things up with waterway debris operations and wildfire debris operations, 2 really kind of higher order, higher end debris programs that communities may have to be engaged in after disasters. So let's dive into those recent incidents. And again, nationally, this kind of is a cross section of the severe weather events. Again, some of the things we're going to be talking about are the wildfires and severe weather events here within the state of Texas. We're going to talk today about the Maui wildfire that occurred in August of last year. We also saw some flooding up in Vermont in the past year as well. So, and then a couple of tornadoes up in the Arkansas area. We also saw tornadoes across the state of Mississippi. So again, wild year for weather. Not so good. Not so active of a hurricane season, which was very, very good, and we'll get into some of the projections for this year as well. So here within the state of Texas, again, we've got it all. Again, from a Houston-Galveston area, HGAC's coverage, which you can see there in the map in the back here, extends all the way from Matagorda County in the south, all the way up to Walker County in the north. Very diverse area, and again, we're going to be prone to flooding, which impacted some of the region in January of this year. The Smokehouse Creek wildfire. This was up in the Texas Panhandle area. It's Pampa and some of those other towns there. That was a really interesting wildfire. Nick, you were up there. You got to see some of the impacts. You talk a little bit about that. That was on the national news for many, many days.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a lot of resources that were deployed to the Panhandle, immediately, I guess, during the fire, number one, to contain it and to try to put it out. But I think that ended up being the largest wildfire in Texas history, but it was number 1 or 2 in the U.S. as well. A lot of times in wildfire events, right, from a debris standpoint, we usually are talking about burned homes, and the remediation and debris removal that needs to take place during those, after that event. And up in that region, it ended up, although it was incredibly large, I think in the Borger and Canadian area, or Borger, it was like 200 homes, and then way far away, almost an hour and a half or so, was another 200. So a couple of pockets of just, very widespread damage. So that was interesting to see. And of course, no federal declaration was made in that region, which was another real challenge for them to deal with in terms of funding and response. And
yeah, and I'll say this from a debris perspective. The reason why we're bringing this up is just because of how devastating wildfires are. Thousands of structures can go up in flames so quickly. We saw it in Bastrop here in 2011. Maui, we've seen it across the state of California and up in Oregon. And it just truly is, from a debris perspective, the largest, the most costly, and really the complexion of the community changes. I don't want to say forever to overstate things, but it's certainly a planning scenario that we all need to be aware of and take a look at. The March 15th storm, again, talking about that one, that was a very concentrated area down in Angleton, down in Brazoria County. And then the April 10th event, which was on, which was again, a regional event, strong storms hitting that Katy area out in western Harris County. Moving along to the May 4th event, which actually, that yielded a tree through my roof those days of flooding. So that was a debris generator right there. And then finally, the May 17th derecho, which, again, the derecho, for those of you who haven't heard that term, who may not be familiar, is not the latest Houston sports team that Tillman Fertitta is trying to bring here. Not that new hockey team, but it's that severe straight line wind event that really impacted that wide swath of Houston and Harris County. Again, moving from northwest to southeast. So, Nick, I know you.
Quick pause on that.
Yeah.
So the events leading up to this point, except for the early May flooding, none of that was eligible for federal disaster assistance, especially when we talk about debris, Category A. And so we've seen a number of these weird, strange, out of nowhere, disaster-related incidents that, again, burden the local community, but and become problems right at the local level for the jurisdiction to handle, sometimes overwhelming the resources that you have with no federal assistance until we got to the basically the early May floods, and now that the FEMA has grouped those together into the disaster event that we have now.
Yes, that one might also call it a pattern of
Yes.
weather pattern, and which is going to be important here from a disaster perspective here very, very shortly. So again, you're noticing a rhythm. It seems like every week, every 2 weeks, the guys like Jeff Littner, those guys are not getting much sleep. The meteorologists out there are seeing this pattern. Now we move on to Temple, Texas, which again, a pattern that is part of this, just 3 or 5 days later. And then we also, even for those of you who are up at the Texas Division of Emergency Management Conference, there were some straight line winds there. Tornadoes in Collin County and Denton County and Cook County, I believe, is the other area. So what ended up happening, again, a day after the May 17th event, was that this yielded a disaster 4781. And this is really important to see here for those of you listening online and you're here in person, is that incident period went from April 26th to June 5th. So that means all those storms we talked about, starting on April 26th and ongoing, almost a month and a half. I mean, not quite a month and a half, but a month and change, let's call it. All of those are in this disaster period. Whew. Okay, so this is a lot. These are all the actions taken by the federal government and FEMA through the president's initial incident action right here, and then these are all the dates. So you can see this is when the ball got rolling, May 17th, just 1 day after the disaster. And what's important also to understand is that this declaration, this May 17th, did not include the public assistance program. That did not come until 3 or 4 days later, I think is Amendment 1 or Amendment 2, where they added public assistance, making the debris program eligible. So at this point in the disaster, only the individual assistance program was allowable. And that means that for those of you who were impacted by the event, could be eligible for that assistance. So this, we don't see, we do see a lot of amendments, from time to time. What we don't see all the time is an incident period that is retroactive, almost, a month. And then up until June 5th, the disaster was open. So again, anything that happened, it doesn't matter where it was in the state of Texas, that it could be added to this disaster declaration. So you can see, it's all over the place. It's checkerboard right there. You have that heavy impact here in the Houston-Galveston region, but you got that Jasper-Newton-Sabine area. You got all the way up in north central Texas. even including Dallas County. And what you got, Calhoun down there, maybe? Bell, which is that Temple area, Bell County, I believe, and Guadalupe County, all the way out into west of Lubbock. So all over the place. And again, the reason this happens and what's important here is that you have the hatch declaration and then you have the green declaration, which is these communities who are hatched pink or salmon or whatever, I don't know, whatever good color it is, those mean that debris management is going to be an eligible expense under the FEMA Public Assistance Program. The rest, it's just open to individuals. So it's important detail. You know, when it comes to disasters, details do matter. But we expect this to change quite dramatically. I mean, Nick, you've been up in,
Temple.
You've seen Temple and what's going on
Bell
there.
County.
And I mean, that's a pretty sizable debris program, right?
Right. There's a lot of debris in Temple, a lot of damage, and throughout Bell County. So, I would expect that that
certainly
gets wrapped in.
Yeah, certainly that, and potentially some other spaces as well. And again, this is there's some resources on HGAC's website that can, and as well as FEMA's website, that you can find out, those thresholds for what it takes to meet that disaster declaration. And within the state of Texas, it's a high bar to cross or to leap over. But the fact that, again, we have a disaster that dates from here to here, that really is good for Texans across the state. And these are all the counties. So you can see, I think it's, I wish I knew the number, but I mean, you can see it's a lot of counties there. Again, individual assistance here, counties. And then this is the individual assistance program. This is pulled off of the FEMA website. FEMA, I will say, has done a great job in providing open data sets via its website, and I believe yesterday they run the report every Monday. So this was dated the 10th of June. That there were over 150,000 registered applicants, and or almost 35,000 applicants that have applied for the individual assistance program throughout the state of Texas. And I mean, there's over 10 disaster recovery centers all over the state. This is a very large series of events. I think it certainly rivals or could be bigger than those events in 2015 and 2016, which also exceeded that threshold. So again, you can see this number is going to rise. These individual assistance applications, those numbers are going to rise. And it's going to be interesting to see really just the magnitude of these spring storms, these month of May storms, and what impacts it may have to the state of Texas. So there we go. We made it to hurricane season. Congratulations, everybody. There's a great Facebook feed called, what is it, Texas Emergency Management or something along those lines. It's one of those Facebook groups, and they post silly stuff from time to time. And this one, Brian and I saw and thought it was good. So we got that Jumanji level 6, and we made it to hurricane season. Really and truly, look, this is why we're talking here today, is these incidents that have occurred, we've had a frequency that you don't see very often, and they do happen with little or no notice. I mean, I can tell you, I did not think, when the Eric Bergers of the world or the Matt Lanzas that you follow here locally are calling for some severe weather, some thunderstorms, some lightning, that sort of thing, I had no idea it would be to the extreme that it was. And I don't think many people called for that, as well as that storm system came from Waller down to southeast Texas. But it certainly does. So that's why we have to be prepared. And Brian, this is taken right outside your mom's house, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so Brian's mom lives in the Lazy Brook Timber Grove area, just right here at 610 and 290. I mean, this is damage, and I drove through that neighborhood. I used to live in that neighborhood, and this is damage consistent with a Hurricane Ike in 2008. A hurricane, in any sort of large wind event. You looked at the Category 1, Category 2 damage. Nick, I know you drove that area.
Well, that thing flew over my house.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was severely damaged / destroyed homes about 300 yards from where I live in Cypress. So, yeah, and then immediately after that, most of your older growth subdivisions have a lot of tree damage, obviously all the way down over even into the Channelview area. We've seen a lot. So,
yeah, and so I think it's important to understand is that many jurisdictions have had that significant staff turnover since these events. I mean, we're talking 2008 and 2017 being the last flood and last hurricane event. And I mean, it's great to see faces like Lee Crowder here with Galveston County who have that institutional knowledge, but I know there's a lot of communities who don't. And that's why we're here today talking about the importance of this and having a plan. And then obviously, as I mentioned last year, no big disasters, but above normal record season, whatever, unprecedented. I'm getting tired of that word, but that's something that they're predicting here with 2024 for the number of named storms. And you hear guys like Francisco Sanchez, who is formerly with Harris County, now with SBA. He said it only takes one. I know that's cliche, but it's true. And but with the probability of La Nada, I think that was what Travis Herzog, he's one of the meteorologists. It's not an El Nino, it's not a La Nina, it's like nothing. That doesn't bode well for this area. I just was reading that the other day. And again, I'm no meteorologist or even amateur meteorologist, but you have to just be aware of what's going on. And that's really why we're here talking about planning and things that you can do as a jurisdiction to ease the burden and to really get things up and running quickly, because you may not have that 24, 48 hour, 72 hour notice to get your ducks in a row. You may have again, a couple of hours, 2 to 4 hours to get those things moving. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nick, starting that discussion about pre-positioned contracts, debris sites that we need to do, and some of those planning considerations.
So one of the things I'll first tell you is in our discussions with entities all over the state of Texas, even into Louisiana, where I deal with clients, everyone feels the same way about this year. And the way they feel is, yeah, it's going to be bad. I'm a little nervous about it, and I feel like it's our turn. They all say that. I'm telling you, from especially Louisiana all the way down to South Texas. Although South Texas is kind of in the boat where they really want some rain, so they're going to take anything they can get. But however, so when we talk about that, what is the number one thing you can do to prepare? Okay, we can make sure our debris plans are up to date. John mentioned we've seen a lot of staff turnover in governments across the nation. And so we go into places and we've realized that maybe they're facing a new disaster. The people who were there before who have done it before are gone. And so I tell you that because one of the best things that you need to have are pre-positioned contracts. So let's talk about that for a second. We're going to go through what a pre-positioned contract is, maybe how you can address that, and things you can do to help be better prepared for those no-notice events and potentially a big hurricane that's coming your way. So I will ask you, I'd like to challenge all of you. You don't have to say anything, but even online, you're in a disaster debris workshop. So do you know who your debris hauling contractor is? Do you know the status of that contract? Do you know who your debris monitor is? Because you will need both in a FEMA declared disaster removal operation. And if you're listening to this and you're not quite sure, again, you don't have to say anything, but I will challenge you to go and find that out in your agency. If you find out your contracts are expired, maybe it's time to refresh that, go through a bidding process while you have time, because that's really the best thing, other than the experience, that you can do to have the resources that you need when it's time to respond. So pre-position contracts, FEMA encourages jurisdictions to award those in advance, right? That's the whole point. It allows you to basically, in situations where you're overwhelmed and maybe your municipal staff, your road and bridge staff, your public works, who might usually handle, debris removal type operations, when they're overwhelmed or when you have a lot of debris, you may need to pull in outside resources. So you want a debris hauling contract to do that. And then, like I said, a debris monitoring contract to oversee, to provide data and to track all your debris per FEMA guidelines. So another reason, let's talk about why. Communities around you are going to be competing for the same resources that you may have. So making sure that you have contracts, resources to pull in, and can successfully make sure you have what you need while your neighbors and even region-wide is facing the same thing. You don't want to be the last one to the table asking for equipment to come your way, right? Another benefit, really saves time in an emergency. I could give you a couple examples in Texas right now, but I won't say the name. But there are communities right now who are facing what we described as a lot of debris in their community, and they don't have any pre-position contracts, and they need the services. So think about, what do they have to do now? They're doing emergency procurements. They're issuing a contract to different debris contractors based on an emergency need. And so to protect themselves, they're doing that for a very short amount of time, maybe 30 days, maybe 20 days, and then bidding the hauling resources and the monitoring contracts at the same time that they can use after that emergency period. And we'll talk a little bit about emergency conditions here in a minute, so you have a couple of tools in the toolbox for that.
Nick, I said I wasn't going to talk about webworms, but I'm going to talk about webworms. So, guys, this is, again, I'm just dealing with it right now. And these pre-positioned contracts, when you don't have one, everybody comes out of the woodwork like webworms, and you're going to get just engulfed, and they're going to be everywhere. They're going to be contractors. If you have a disaster, contractors will find you. I've heard of contractors, true story, I heard this yesterday, that they knew somebody was in a hotel room staying, and the contractors were knocking on hotel room doors trying to find this person because they wanted to talk to them. And people do get aggressive like webworms, and they're going to. And so this is webworm solution, okay? And guys, I cannot tell you how much time, headache, medicine. This is going to be good. And I'm not faulting anybody. It's everybody's job. People want to get the things cleaned up. It's somebody's responsibilities. Vendors are out there just trying to, again, find more information out or differentiate themselves. And I'm not faulting anybody. I'm just telling you that this is one of those things that having a pre-position contract, you can immediately get to work and cut, all the stuff and just start picking up debris, and which is all what everybody's here to do.
Yes. One other point I'd make on this slide is that we are seeing, especially in urban areas, the pressure to initiate debris removal activities is becoming faster and faster. During the Hurricane Harvey time, I would say it was like about a week. When you say Jamie or Don, y'all are both contractors in here. So that was kind of, if you could get an operation running in 5, 6, 7 days, that you were doing good. Now it's 3 or 4 days, which, sounds only like a couple of days, but you are moving mountains to make that happen. And I would say you can only do that with having your pre-positioned contracts. Another good thing is you want to make sure that when you do this, you procure it right. So you always want to rely on our friends in purchasing departments or purchasing agents, whoever in your city or your county handles that, making sure that you've got full and open competition, that it's advertised appropriately in multiple places so that different vendors can find that and hopefully prepare responses for you and submit their bids. Your scope of work should include anticipated disaster work. So what you wouldn't want to do is just bid out, like a landscaping, trimming trees and bushes kind of contract and then expect that you're gonna do disaster debris removal under that as well. You want to make sure you include small and minority businesses, women business enterprises, and labor surplus area firms. We're seeing a lot more of that common in all forms of local, state, and city government, and it's a great thing. It really helps pull in smaller businesses into those programs, because what we find in the industry is there is a ton of work, and the more resources you can have on your project is a very good thing. Helps also to get workers back hired in the community in times of disaster. So you may have city or goals in your community or requirements to meet, and just make sure you follow those and federal guidelines for that as well. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, this one, again, when it comes to doing the outreach for the small minority women-owned businesses, labor surplus firms, and so on and so forth, all of that is laid out very clearly in what you're required to do as the purchaser of the services within the Code of Federal Regulations. And there's a lot of information out there about what it will take to satisfy those requirements. Cheryl.
This may never happen, but my question is, what happens if you do all of this and you still only get like 2 people to respond, or 2 firms? Do you have to go back out?
That's a great question.
If you're doing it as an emergency and you still don't get to 3, what happens then?
So and again, that is a great question, Cheryl. What happened? And it happens. I think it happened here recently. Nick and I were talking about that, about a community here. I believe it was in the HGC area that had put out a procurement, and I think they got none of the bids, or one bid.
Oh, yes.
And so you're in a pickle, is what you're in. And what I would say is, in that sort of situation where you do get 1 bid or 2 bids, you look at your, did you do enough you could go there and try to build that case to justify, did I create a market? Did I publish it in all the places? Did Demand Star and this, that, and the other? As a part of that, you can do some outreach as to why these vendors didn't bid. Did you directly send it to vendors? Those sorts of things, and document your procurement process to understand where was the failure, or maybe not a failure. Excuse me. I don't mean to say that in terms of a person failed, but just in the process. And then once you understand that, you can either consider rebidding, or you can consider moving forward with the situation. There's so many circumstances, like did you do it after the disaster? So were you in an exigent or emergency circumstance? Or was this a pre-positioned type contract? And hey, you know what? I'm gonna have to go out to bid again. We may have to do the pre-bid, and maybe we'll do more outreach. Maybe I had gone to TDEM conference, the Texas Division of Emergency Management that was in Fort Worth last week. And I went around to every dadgum booth and saw everybody, and I told them I was going to be coming out with this bid, and we still didn't get it. It's some of those things. I know they're anecdotal, but to try to better understand what you did to go create a market and to go put that out there. Did that answer your question, Cheryl? Okay. I would definitely recommend going through the full and open procurement process. And, I think that is the most risk-averse approach to doing the procurement. Certainly HGC has, pre-qualified vendors. It may be a good resource. I mean, listen, you can Google disaster debris management, there's like I said, folks here who represent firms, and I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, and there's a lot of good reputable firms.
Thank you. So back to the slide. Another good thing is to ensure that your contract your contractor was not suspended or debarred. You can do that by federal checks. Prohibit the use of statutorily or administratively imposed geographic preferences. So what does that mean? We wouldn't want to solicit our resources and say that only can be, must be housed and have an office in Houston, Harris County, Texas, right? The next one would be excluding contractors that develop or draft the specifications, requirements, statements of work, et cetera. So you would not want to take scope of work directly from somebody and then put that out for your procurement. A little bit more on a checklist. So we want to make sure the contract was procured in compliance with the federal regulations. I know we can look at CFR 200 and
certainly.
the standard language in there. We do that a lot for different communities. So you want to make sure you include all of that, all of those federal requirements in there, and that your contract costs are fair and reasonable in the current market environment. So another, John, how do you know that? How do you know that the costs that come in are fair and reasonable or reasonable?
I think there's a lot of good resources out there. This is more, I don't want to say it's more art than science, but, taking the proper steps in you as a jurisdiction to go out through the bid process and you creating the market, I think is extremely important. Asking your contractor what other contracts they have, when you have that, to get that other data point, or calling other vendors. You are in the Houston-Galveston area. I think nearly everyone has one of these types of contracts or rebidding theirs or so on and so forth. So there's a lot of good information out there. There's a network of purchasing agents, emergency managers. There's resources out there for you to be able to get this data point and at least know out there you're not paying $50 a cubic yard to load and haul somebody when everybody else is paying $5 a yard. And if you are, then there's got to be some sort of reason. And those numbers are completely fabricated. Don't hold me to those. And those aren't, I don't know, whatever weasel words I have to say, but I'm just using that.
All right,
for
give me the
hyperbole.
microphone. Give me the microphone back. Just kidding. On the topic of price that's not on this slide, I think we would all recommend don't necessarily go with the lowest bid, okay? Give yourself some room to evaluate contractors and resources, and I'm using that word very broadly here, based on their qualifications, experience, references. I would always encourage you to call up the references that are listed from various proposals that come in from these companies. And why is that? The why is because you want really good talent to come into your community, somebody who can front load a lot of expenses to get disaster work and remediation going. And if you just go with lowest price, some people in here might believe that, well, cheap is best, or, but you could potentially get in a bind with a very small, let's say local landscaping company who wins a bid based on price and can't perform, and nobody wants that to happen. No, none of us want that to happen in a very large project like that. So unfortunately, we've seen it happen in various communities. So procurement methods. FEMA may reimburse costs incurred under a contract when procured through a non-competitive proposal. So what we've been talking about is competitive type proposals, only when the item is only available from a single source, which is not typically debris removal or monitoring contract services. The public exigency or emergency for the requirement will not permit a delay resulting from competitive solicitation. And FEMA or the recipient expressly authorizes a non-competitive proposal in response to a written request from the applicant. What I would tell you is, I think we would all say, is regardless of this language, you're always best doing competitive solicitations and focus on do scoring with your evaluation committee that allows you flexibility to not just focus on price. Okay, this next slide is about the Procurement Disaster Assistance Team, or PDAT Field Manual. This is a FEMA guideline that provides guidance regarding the mandatory requirements for FEMA recipients and subrecipients using federal funding to finance that procurement and property of services. Could I get maybe Brian or you to
Yeah, so
chime in
on
on this?
PDAT, there are great resources. A PDAT team based out of DC. They've done in-person trainings. I know that the city of Houston has requested and received those training. This field guide is very easy to read, easy to understand, and is a great tool just to bring in your procurement, your legal, or your legal counsel, if it's internal or external, your engineering or emergency management, and just kind of crosswalk that to this field manual. And again, it's a couple years old, but still the standard today. And it's something that again, we see prior to the disaster, where they provide assistance, and then even after the disaster, they'll do field half-day workshops, and they're out there, kind of getting that information and getting that word out.
Thank you. So to wrap up some of this procurement discussion, what we recommend is looking at your scoring and your contractor selection. So maintaining records about how you did the procurement, your rationale, the selection, maybe the evaluation of the contract award, the contractor's selection or rejection towards the procurement, and then the basis for your contract price and your ultimate selection committee evaluation. So what are other good things you can do? How about coordinating your planning activities with these types of companies and individuals? The way you can do that is, by, I would say the way not to do it is to just put out, RFPs really without, if you don't know what you're trying to buy, what you're trying to solicit resources for. So as John mentioned, like going to a regional conference or TDM and having those discussions with contractors and consultants that work in this space and figuring out, because there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, what type of work do you do? I'm interested in buying X, and I need to learn more about that, because everybody in this industry, I find, will do a lot of hand-holding, training, discussions, one-on-ones, whatever works for you all.
Nick, again, we've seen different styles. We've seen doing a workshop or a tabletop exercise, bringing vendors in, great idea. We've seen meetings that have focused on debris management sites, which I know we're going to be talking about. Which one have you seen that is the most, greatest value? Is it just, hey, having coffee in
honestly,
an office?
I would say
what do you think?
all of them. The hardest thing is once the RFP is out and you're in that cone of silence, you can't have those discussions, right? So,
but even after you make the selection, and now you're sitting down there, you've got your vendor, you went with a new vendor.
Post-selection?
Yeah, post-selection. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So I guess 3 biggest thing for you in terms of planning is to meet with your contractors. Absolutely. You should expect your debris hauling contractor and your monitor to come in, touch base with you. This time of year is really hot and heavy for this region in particular, being on the Gulf Coast. In other areas, further north, when they're just more focused on maybe the tornado aspect or ice storms, then those times are a little bit different. But absolutely, having, we see a lot of, what Houston needs is actually they need the Houston region needs its own disaster recovery seminar workshop. Not this one. Like, we need a South Texas All Hazards Conference, right?
They did a really good job. These sub-regional areas, I know we've done that in the past, and I think that there is good information out there, and people are willing to travel again or do it via Teams, Zoom,
right,
WebEx, all those things that you can, just making the time, making that 1 hour available to understand who you are going to be working with and what resources that you're expecting them to bring to bear and in what timeline can really save you a ton of headaches and problems if you do have to activate them.
Absolutely. I would also say, in moving on, if you're a community and you have those resources already, but you know that your public works staff, or you've got a group of people that really, they've never seen any of this disaster
Right.
type stuff, I would
Exactly.
say bring them in, ask people to do a 30 minutes to an hour training on that material and just be better prepared. Okay, this one is one of my favorites. It is identify debris management sites before a disaster. So why would we want to do that? Well, number one, I'll tell you, in my experience, this is really important in our urban areas. Again, we talked about the ability to respond. We talked about having contractors. We talked about mobilization is happening faster and faster. Well, you really can only start moving debris when you've got a good place to take it to, right? So depending on what the event is and what the majority of your debris is out on the streets, let's say it's all, right now it's vegetative, right? It's all woody debris. Are we gonna haul that straight to a landfill and fill it up? Probably not. And even if you did, then you're gonna wait, and the trucks are gonna wait in line at that landfill. So that, again, slows the operation down. So having a temporary site where your contractors can set it up, bring debris there to stage it, and then ultimately reduce it, and then haul out that final reduced product as mulch, is really critical. So what we're seeing, particularly in this Houston-Galveston area, is that sites we used before, they're just not there. They are neighborhoods now. They've been redeveloped. And so just looking around, and I know contractors are really good at finding debris management sites, but always having one in your back pocket is what I like to say. Maybe it's a big parking lot you have in your city or your county, or an open space that really has already been disturbed and could just be set up almost instantly and used is really good.
This piece about the debris management sites, we've talked about, they always say don't bury the lead, and when you're writing a story, there's a reason why we put the contracted resources and debris management sites up front, okay? Those are your starting pitchers, okay? This is really important to get this program out on the right foot, is having a debris management site available, and with the appropriate number of acreage, space, ingress, egress, all those things are just that important, because that's how you got to have the resources, and you got to have a place for them to go. And if your plan is we're going to take it to a landfill, the whole nine, all of it to a landfill, I would say that may not be the best plan, and you need to look at those plans again, because this is an industry best practice. We do it everywhere, and that's really important.
You know what else is that this community, all of us, we haven't seen big vegetative debris sites since what, like Ike?
Yeah, that's 2008.
The flood. We had all this flooded debris. But not a lot of vegetative debris that needed to really be managed. So I know with several of the folks in this audience, if you have not seen one and you really want to, I'm sure we can get you out to some of the sites being used in the Houston-Harris County right now and give you a tour. John said I could rent a limo bus, and yeah, we'll do it up.
It was more one of those pedal bike.
No.
That's 16 years ago, though. Those Ike 16 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a lifetime ago. I mean, as far as elected officials, and again, you talk about these wind events. It's so much has changed within the geography of the area. Hey, Cheryl.
So my question is, I have a lot of debris. I want it composted. Do I tell my debris hauler that's what I want it to do, and they're responsible finding the end use for that compost, or who handles that part? Or
That's a great question. I
would say don't say compost, but typically it's ground wood chips that end up being mulch. We got two contractors in here if y'all want to chime in.
So do they find the end market,
contracts
so it just doesn't sit there?
The contracts usually specify, you have line items in like your hauling contract for DMS management, reduction of waste, so grinding for veg or compaction for C&D, construction and demolition debris is what I mean. And so usually that's the process. Like all this vegetative debris, honestly, we can't send it all to a landfill. Now, landfills in the area may want that wood chip product for landfill cover, and I'm sure y'all are aware of that. That's one way to get rid of the chips. But other options
I'd say it's a team effort, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we can say, hey, your contract specifies it's your responsibility and da-da-da-da, but you as the owner of that contract, I mean, I'd say just being a good partner that, the market's going to be flooded, so you're going to have a glut, and I think from that perspective, having your, environment, having a regional planning council, having people in the solid waste industry, the landfill people. I mean, nobody wants to see this necessarily, all this stuff go into the landfill as just, taking up airspace for MSW, municipal solid waste. But I know your contract says one thing, but I think everybody should work together. I don't know, Don, Jamie, any other perspectives on the in-market side? Because I know people have gotten creative with it.
Most of these pre-positioning contracts are built so that the haul out's based on mileage, right? So
True.
It'd be best for the owner of the contract to find the shortest distance for us to take that. And whatever beneficial reuse we can all find together, is obviously better for everyone. Save you money.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that was just laying out there, man, like an Easter egg. These haul outs are based on, many of these contracts have haul out rates 0 to 30, 31 to 60, 61 to 120, whatever it is. So you as that owner do have a financial incentive to help, get rid of this in the closest way possible.
Absolutely. I was thinking of something when you talked. I mean, obviously right now there is a lot of vegetative debris that's going to go to mulching sites. One thing to consider is you never want to be the last one holding the bag, right? And what that means is in big events like Ike, there was so much mulch, right? There's mulch everywhere. I remember we were shipping mulch to like a power plant in Louisiana because you'll saturate your local markets, which also brings up, making wood chips from vegetative debris is not the only disposal option. Some people burn, but it's less common in the HGAC region. Haven't quite figured out why. No, I'm just kidding. It is just, but when you get outside of the, Houston area, communities are more open to burning debris as a disposal method, which is very efficient. So moving on, what else do we want to have? How about a list of our internal resources? Do we know that? Do we know all the, Bob over in Public Works, how many trucks he's got that can actually pick up debris? We find that a lot. Or making sure you know how to coordinate amongst your city or county departments. And here's what I mean by that. We all have had projects where maybe your solid waste department is kind of the lead, but you've got your parks department and you've got your facilities department and you've got your road and bridge department that all need assistance, but you have to be able to really coordinate that, and you kind of need one owner, if you will, one manager to facilitate not only those discussions, but the resources and the operational details. John, document force account, or Brian, force account expenses. So how do we want to do that?
I think it is following that 214, ICS 214, which if you are not as familiar with it, this is the activity log and understanding what that individual did. So filling this out, using this ICS 214 is the best practice nationally in documenting the force account labor, and having a system in place, whether that is an Excel spreadsheet, whether that is comparing it to your timekeeping system, your chrono system, not only identifying what that individual did, but then cross-referencing it with what they actually got paid to do, and then making determinations of whether or not you're going to pay for the employee's time, straight time, overtime, whether or not you are going to whether or not you're just going to pay for their straight time and then do comp time. all those sorts of things, and being able to tie the employee time, the equipment time, what supplies, rental, even any volunteer hours as an offset, those are all really important in place. So when you're looking at internal resources, okay, and understanding, hey, this is my assessment of what I can use to clear debris, and now I've got a system in place to track all that. Now I'm, again, better prepared to handle that, small Angleton event, the smaller event that hit eastern Harris County a couple of months ago. Almost 12 of them. When that hit there, now you have a system in place to address those smaller events, and now you got your big events, and now you got your smaller events, and now you're better prepared.
Could you talk a little bit from my friends in the room about, okay, I need to fill out a 214 log, but I got to move stuff. Bob is driving this truck every day, nonstop. Can you talk a little bit about, so what do we do when we don't have this filled out? What can we do to help people get the information that they need at the end of the day?
Yeah, so tailgate talks and really having enforcement with your supervisors, or assigning an individual that is the timesheet guru, or the timesheet Yoda, whatever you want to call them, that they are responsible. If you have an owner, you have someone responsible for it. And I think, if the individual who's out there and they are driving that truck day in, day out, they have their equipment, having a process in place and an owner, I think goes a long way to do it at the beginning or the end of the day, and just making sure they sign, those timesheets, that sort of thing. We have had instances where we've had to, where documentation's got lost. You do attestations, so on and so forth, based on different data points. But ideally, you want to have those 214s in place.
Gotcha. All right, next one. I'll do this one pretty quick because I know we want to take a break here in a second. GIS files. So making sure that, just talk to your GIS staff about making sure you have things that you might need in an emergency. I'll throw you a couple of good ones. So municipal boundaries, your limits, your roadways, what you maintain in the community, things like that, because your contractors are going to need those. Then we start looking at areas where you've had maybe hazards, or you have evidence of early damage immediately after the event. And then also we use those to document the progress of debris operations. So this is a really important thing. We can get it, I like to say, have GIS people talk to GIS people, and usually things work out. But being able to make sure who has the latest roadway maintenance, boundary and maintenance jurisdiction for what you maintain. Priority road list. So why would we want that? How about event comes through, all your roads are blocked. Which ones are you going to try to open up first? Which ones are you going to send your road and bridge crew to push, or ask a contractor to come in those first few hours and start to move debris? You're going to want to go to probably open up where your hospitals are, roads that lead to that, your critical county or city facilities, things like that. So just knowing what you would, having a game plan for responding immediately is very critical. Have a plan for coordinating public information. Well, why would we want to do that? This is really important, and this is where your PIOs and your communication strategists come in. So one that comes to mind is the graphic we've all seen that talks about separating your debris. That's really handy after an event.
HGAC's graphic.
HGAC's graphic.
People, where's the farthest that we've seen that graphic be used? I think Canada, gone international. That's great. Now it's going to go interstellar here pretty soon. That graphic is a great way to get the word out, Nick.
Yes. What else is helpful? Telling people what's going on in your community in terms of response. Maybe that's power outage information, traffic, roadway conditions, et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing over the last few years, obviously, and you know this, there's a lot more ability to distribute information through different tools like social media, the Facebook, the Twitters, all that good stuff. A lot of LinkedIn messages that we see too in terms of, you know, highlighting your community's progress and stuff like that in disaster recovery. Another good tool, this is where Brian really has all of our expertise in this, but maintaining and updating your hazards plan, your debris management plan. A lot of times we run into some entities don't know, or it was done 10 years ago and, you know, it's in a drawer somewhere. I mean, it is something you should pull out, keep up to date, especially in terms of like maps, your boundaries, roadways. John, I see you. I know you want to say something.
No, I'm just saying,
Okay.
Brian, you've put these plans together. You've done a lot of them, big jurisdictions, small jurisdictions. You know, what are the top 3 things that, you know, you, based on your experience, you know, in putting these plans together that, you know, people need to know? I mean, I know we've talked about, hey, the contracts and the DMSs, that's 1A and 1B, but what are the 3, you know, two or three different things that people walk out of here today, like they gotta know,
Well, some of the things that we try to make sure we have in the plans is that, first of all, know how bad can be. And so putting in some forecasts and some information in there about how much debris you might be able to expect from a particular type of disaster. You know, so a lot of times we look at the hazard mitigation plans of the jurisdiction and try to see, you know, what are the threats this jurisdiction faces, and what types of debris and what quantities of debris can we see from that. So you kind of use that as a basis for planning to say, okay, this is what we can expect. Now what do we need to do next? And so, you know, then it's looking at the roles of the different departments. You know, who's going to do what? You know, try to get that nailed down ahead of the disaster. So you don't have people arguing about, that's not my job. You don't want to have those kind of discussions during a disaster. So, you know, make sure you have it down. Who's going to do what? Get those contracts lined up. You know, get all that in place. And then also is having a strategy on how you're going to attack the debris. Keeping in mind that, you know, if you've had to activate your disaster debris management plan, you're going to have a host of other problems going on. And so whatever strategy you use has to fit in with the other activities going on in your EOC, or maybe you have your own facilities that are damaged or being repaired, staff may be affected. So making sure that your plan is flexible, but you also have a good track to run on what we need to do, what comes first, what comes next, who do we need to meet with, and those.
Yeah, how about like contact information for your resources?
Yeah, because one of the things we try to do too is put not only the contact information for staff, contractors, but then also looking out in the community to say, where are we going to put this stuff? You know, who can we contact? You know, where are the landfills? Where
the
are
disposal
those,
sites.
You know, different facilities that can accept the debris. What are some options for recycling, reuse? The EPA has a lot of good guidance on that, on how you can reuse and recycle debris. So, and they have frequent webinars on that topic as well.
So I love that. So Brian, you're saying people are going to be running away from this, so make sure you've got them identified. I mean, honestly, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, somebody wants this. Somebody wants to empire build, make a career, da-da-da. You know, what we've seen is really the opposite. So having that plan in place is going to be important. Know how much debris is out there, because that's going to drive a lot of your planning assumptions. And then just have a strategy. Know what you're going to do and who's going to be doing it. And I'll say, I like to simplify things. If you could do those 3 things, I mean, I think you're 95% of the way there. This is not rocket surgery here.
Yeah.
Oh, Cheryl.
I'm sorry, one more question.
You bet.
So for these plans, do they have to be approved by anybody, by DEM, TCQ, or the council or commission? What happens? Is there approval process or adoption?
Well, there used to be, and a lot of times the state will take a look at them, but FEMA no longer reviews them. They used to. You used to have to send them to the state and then to FEMA for approval. And the previous administration kind of did away with all that. But still, having a plan in place is really important to be prepared and having a track, to run on if something bad should happen. But yeah.
Moving on, we sort of talked about this, but evaluating those resources on especially disposal. So where, metal or even white goods and appliances, as we call them, where those can go, your mulching capabilities, landfills, hazardous waste. Cheryl, what kind of hazardous waste might we have out there in our disaster-related community? What would it be?
Oil-based paint.
Yeah, that household hazardous waste. There we go. So that's a really good point, is making sure you also have that capability to handle what we call household hazardous waste and HHW that may come from your impacted residents, as well as electronic waste, recyclers, and then Cheryl's favorite is the composting facilities. And with that, I think we're about ready for a break.
That is fantastic. Sorry.
He said that is
Yes, we are.
fantastic.
Yes. So we are going to take a 5-minute break to stretch your legs. We are at the official HGAC clock of, 10, and the official iPhone watch clock. So we're going to get back at 10:15, and then we'll jump into some debris management resources for residents, businesses. We're going to get into some other information. So please come back. Thank you. We got 50 plus on the phone. Just get a quick 5-minute bio break, and we'll talk in just a second. Thanks so much. During the break, we got a couple of questions here, and the first one is to clarify the requirement for 2 contracts of hauling and monitoring. And I want to clarify, that's a best practice. You could certainly have your debris hauling contract in place and do some sort of self-monitoring. Again, there are a lot of resources out there that can help with doing that documentation requirement. So certainly want to clarify best practice versus need. The next one was, can I specify having pre-season coordination meetings or annual coordination meetings, because we're always in disaster season? Can I specify that in my RFP? Absolutely. We see that all the time as well. Hey, we got to have one in-person meeting at no cost. That's certainly, again, a best practice or an industry standard, rather, that is a part of that. The third question is, hey, are we going to post these slides? Absolutely. We're going to have those slides in there, and we will have those. Wendy sent the information, but we'll send the link, and we'll send the slides. And finally, the question was, if I'm picking up debris using my force account labor resources, what sort of supplemental documentation do I need? And I want to focus on, obviously we talk 214s and equipment logs and so on and so forth, but verifying the actual quantity of debris, I think, is an important piece of this. And so, Nick, we've seen, you can certify your trucks and count the trucks and do all that stuff as you would a contractor, which can give you the volume. But say we didn't do that, and I got a pile of debris. What do I do next?
Yeah, one thing, we see this a lot. So a good practice would be to measure the pile, and you can do that, length times width times height, and get a volume. And if you got some engineers, or you got an engineer in the city or county that could help do that, and maybe factors that the material is veg and it does have some, or whatever it is, and it either has void space in it or it's a complete solid, right? But just getting an overall estimate is good. You could also estimate, let's say maybe you used a city dump truck, and it's approximately, a 10 or 12 yard dump truck. And if you knew how many loads you could also have a number for that, just some simple calculations, and go from there.
Yeah, I've also seen, I was in Horry County, South Carolina, and they had a pile. They had started collecting before the contractor, they thought they needed a contract, and they used they used a drone to take it, and then, and so they actually took all the sides of it. They put it to cool music like you see on your Facebook feeds. No, I'm just kidding about that part, but that would be good. You don't have to turn that in for FEMA reimbursement. But they'll do it volumetric. They did a LiDAR or something like that. I mean, like they did some really next level stuff. So we've seen it as high tech as that and as low tech as counting trucks. But having that volume out there, I think, is important. All right, with that, Brian, why don't you take us through parts 3 and 4 here for debris management resources for residents and commercial folks.
I can't talk about webworms because I have a lot to say about webworms.
I know. Those webworms are going to be, they're awful, evil.
Yes. So anyway, just wanted to spend a little time talking about some of the things that are out there, some of the assistance that's available for the public, because, after all, that's what this is all about. I mentioned that if you've had to activate your debris plan, you've got a lot of other things going on too, and so a lot of people are going to be affected by this. And so having a good understanding of some of the resources that are available for the public that we all serve can be really helpful and provide them the assistance they need. Also, these organizations can also help the community recover a lot faster. So one of them is called Crisis Cleanup. And so these are a group of folks that have a management platform. So of course it's supposed to help improve coordination, reduces duplication of efforts. But one of the neat things they do is they have this program where you can track what the different organizations are doing. They log in and they track where they've been, what they've done. So if let's say they're going down a particular block, like my mother's neighborhood in Lazy Brook, was hit pretty hard. So if there's one of these organizations going through there, they could say, hey, we just hit this address and this address and this, and they're already the debris at the curb. That means now that's ready for the trucks to come through and start picking it up. So anyway, and so then the jurisdiction has access to it, and the organizations put their information in. If the only thing that's about that is that everyone has to kind of play along. The organization has to put their information in. But anyway, it is a really helpful system when everyone is plugging the information into it. Another one is 211 Texas. So if you have people calling in looking for some kind of resource, you can direct them to 211. It's the state of Texas referral line, more or less. And so they have a lot of information. We always tell people if you need to evacuate, you need assistance, call 211. They can hook you up, tell you where the hub centers are, that kind of thing. But also they can help people find things like shelters, if they need food, if they need income assistance, those kind of things. 211 has resources, and they have referral information to help people with those kind of things. So it's a great system that is done by the state. Another is VOADs, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters. And so, a lot of these, there's a whole bunch of different ones that fit in the category of a VOAD. I would try to list them all, but I would probably miss 20 of them because it's many. But you have a lot of different organizations that are designed to come in and help people, muck out homes like the one we have featured here, SBP, St. Bernard Parish. Yeah. So they have a muck and gut guide where they can help people clean out their homes after a flood or a hurricane or something like that. You also have a number of other different organizations like Samaritan's Purse. Anyone heard of that here? Samaritan's Purse is a big one. 8 Days of Hope, Team Rubicon. They do a lot of stuff like that where they can help people get their home cleaned up so they can start the recovery process. So, and they have their muck and gut guide, which is real helpful. Also, the Red Cross has one about how to clean up your flooded home. When I worked for the state of Texas, I pushed that one out quite a bit to folks who were hit after it's Tropical Storm Allison. Well, that's dating myself.
That was June 6th, June 10th, June 6th, 2001.
2001, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So, and then also the state of Texas, the
Hey, can you
Department
go
of
back to
Insurance.
that? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to say, on these volunteer organizations, this is probably the one thing that can speed recovery up so quickly. I mean, we didn't have a crisis cleanup hotline software match, swipe right if you want to clean this house type thing back in 2008 and prior to that. And now we do, and it's such an easy thing. I belong to a volunteer organization that focuses on, service and so on and so forth. And this time, we got through it, and it's a really intuitive, easy way. I'm not saying it's like Uber Eats easy, but it is really easy for organizations, whether they're a couple of families or once you have that login, you can really do some good work. I mean, just getting that stuff out from Mama's backyard out to that front doorstep and on the right of way and coordinating with that contractor. I mean, I know communities are really going it, and it's next level fast if you can get that done.
Yeah. I think, making sure that the folks are kind of playing by the rules. I was out in Montgomery County after flood one time and saw some of these big organizations come out. They had these huge black bags, and they were bagging all the debris. And I'm like, stop, don't bag the debris. They can't pick up the debris if it's bagged. So just making sure that everyone understands those kind of things, and so that, because otherwise then the jurisdiction has to go back and unbag everything. But they can be a great help in helping the community recover much faster and help those people who maybe the elderly or other people have some other kind of issue where they can't take the debris to the curb. So they can be a great partner. And then the Texas Department of Insurance, they have a lot of information available on their website about avoiding insurance scams, because that's always going to be an issue after a disaster. You have these folks come out and try to push their business. Roofing companies and other different ones come out and try to drum up business whatever way they can. And they do have some tips that I've included here. Get more than one bid. Watch what you sign. Make sure you read everything carefully. Be aware of any misleading language. You don't want any open-ended stuff saying, I'll cover the cost of anything that's outstanding, or, just make sure you're not leaving yourself open to any unnecessary expenses. Don't pay up front, and then skip offers to waive your deductible. This is very tempting, and a lot of contractors do this, but the thing that is a concern here is that they're going to make up that money somehow. How are they going to do it? They're going to raise the price at the front end, so you're not, so maybe instead of you paying the deductible, they're collecting that money up front and raising up their price, or maybe they're using inferior materials on your home. So while it sounds tempting, you need to resist that temptation. Red Cross, I mentioned them a little earlier. They have a lot of great information, and they do a lot of really good work after a disaster. Not even after a disaster, just responding to home fires and those kind of things. But they have a lot of great information on their website, and information about fire, flood, hurricanes, tornadoes, winter storm, nuclear explosion. Let's hope we don't have to deal with that. But they actually have guidance on their website about what to do about a nuclear explosion. And then we get into debris management resources for businesses. And so, of course, you think of business, you think of Small Business Administration. And so they offer low interest loans to businesses, nonprofits, homeowners, renters. And so they have those resources available. And you can call them, or you can go to the website to get information there.
You know, SBA is kind of that third leg of the stool when it comes to these disaster federal agencies. You got your FEMA and HUD, and then, you know, SBA being there. And they really do have made up some big ground when it comes to their Office of Disaster Recovery. I can't say enough great things about that organization. Their Office of Disaster Recovery now being led by Francisco Sanchez, who is from the Houston-Galveston area, native Houstonian, and just all around great guy, has come to speak here at these debris management workshops in the past to tell his story about his time working with Harris County, and now he's taking those experiences nationwide and really reimagining what SBA can do for businesses, and, you know, again, the misnomer that it's just for businesses, that it's for individuals as well. And they give out millions of dollars of low-interest loans and grants to those in need impacted by the disaster. So really important point. Just again, we think about disasters holistically when it comes to debris generating events, and this one is understanding that they are out there. You know, Harris County, we've got one there at the Trinity Mendenhall facility that's there on Wirt Road and Westview. They've got this an SBA for this disaster center. It's just a great resource for you know, again, businesses and residents alike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also another tool available as part of the SBA, where if you want to find some lending resources in the area to help you get going again. So there's a link to that, where if you're trying to get some loans to, you know, of course, key in this situation is, you know, have that cash flow to continue so you can continue to operate. There's also community development financial institutions. They also help businesses to obtain affordable credit to recover from disasters, and there's a link there as well. Disaster unemployment insurance, so people who are out of work because of the disaster. You know, depending on the type of disaster that occurs, you know, it could be a lot of folks who may have been affected by it and are out of work. You know, one of the things we have the ability to do when we come into areas is to, you know, employ those people to do monitoring, those kind of things. But, you know, there's also this option under the Texas Workforce Commission to provide unemployment benefits to individuals who've lost their jobs or self-employment who are no longer working as a result of the major disaster. So that's an option that people may not think about, but going through the Texas Workforce Commission can provide some unemployment assistance. And then, of course, FEMA's disasterassistance.gov website has a lot of different resources that are available to assist businesses and others after a disaster. And then, who do you think about most when you want to find someone who's there to assist you? Of course, it's the Internal Revenue Service. You know, they're there to help. They're the government, and they're there to help. But no, actually, they do offer tax relief provisions for people who've been affected by disaster. And so, you know, there's, you know, so if you're a business or even an individual and you've been affected by a disaster, you can contact them, look up their website, and it's got some information there about getting tax relief after a disaster. So anyway, those are
Doing something good. Doing something good.
Exactly.
You know, one other thing I want to talk about businesses, and you know, Nick was out in Collier County, Florida, after Hurricane Ian. Now, Hurricane Ian was October, September of 2022, so not quite 2 years, and it impacted a tremendous amount of the business community. They have a ton of condos, that sorts of things. And Nick, you know, I wanted to really talk to you about what a local government can do to make requests for waivers, what considerations. I mean, because at some point, yes, these businesses are responsible for taking their own debris, but at some point it's just overwhelming. And I mean, and there's opportunities, there's options for you as a government to to assist?
Yeah, so give me a second. One thing is, so we're talking about debris removal in your community where you have commercial entities, and by commercial, let's also talk about condos, apartments,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So by default, they're all on their own. But as you know, and this happened in Florida, a lot of the residents that were in commercial high-rises, when they were able to get back into the community, debris was going everywhere. Everybody was cleaning stuff out. It came to the public right-of-way. There was major streets that got blocked by piles of debris. And so the governments there had to remove debris for emergency access, life, health, and safety. But we ended up having to document a lot of it. And we were documenting it because it was so much, and that really it was getting into debris that should have been handled by like you said, the commercial entities. So we're used to, usually you would ask FEMA in the debris process for, permission to take care of commercial entities under a special program, or gated communities under private, semi-private property debris removal. And if you're going to do debris removal on private property, that all needs separate approval. So on the commercial side, it's usually limited to mom and pop communities or commercial businesses, not, you're not going to do the Home Depot, big box stores, Target, stuff like that. So
But the Main Street USA, a downtown,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
if it's a community, if it's a business that's in a community, that sort of thing. That's what you're trying to target. And also, we also want to know those areas in low to moderate income areas, and
Correct.
those being now listen, I mean there's some areas that have businesses, so on and so forth. But those are the type of waivers that do exist, or disaster-specific guidance that does exist. But you got to start. You got to look at the needs of the community and what sort of disaster is out there. But those are some big, things.
yeah, you could have a mobile home community, and this came up. Mobile home
Oh, yeah.
communities.
That's huge commercial.
Where the government does not own the roads, and then you could have some where your streets, they are actually on adjacent to right-of-way that the county or the city owns and maintains. And so you could potentially go into one, but not the other, because the other is completely private. And
So I think that's important. I mean, again, residents are going to have needs, okay, because you're going to have people like my dad, who's 84 years old. He had some twigs on the roof, so he decided to get up on the roof. And my mom,
where were you?
he didn't tell me about it till they got down from the roof. These resident people will do stuff, especially elderly. I mean, it's these scams, and they're like children. I mean, 84 and 82, my parents, and they literally, she told me, "Oh, your dad just got down from the roof." I said, what are you doing here? But I mean, they do have needs here, and it is important. And commercial buildings, that's going to be an issue out there that you do have to think about. There are some resources out there to assist, because I know, you live it every day, especially with the elderly and and so on and so forth. So next we've got waterways.
Damage assessment.
Oh, damage assessments. Okay, the first
Damage
step of the
assessments.
process, damage assessments. So we move to waterways. Then we're going to wildfire. So we got the basics out of the way in the morning, and now we're getting into a little bit more discrete, acute elements. But damage assessments, we've seen a lot of changes in, and so that's why we're here talking about it.
I'm gonna start off with on damage assessments, processes, and tips. I want our theme to be how to best capture initial damage in our community that you will need throughout the project. And what I mean is everything from, like, once your search and rescue mission is over, someone in the EOC is handing you a recovery operation, which is like your damage assessments, your inspections, and debris. And so what I want us to focus on is, so how are we going to know where all our damage is? And let's use two examples. So you might have a flood, and you could have homes underwater. You won't know exactly who's impacted until later on. But when your staff are out there running around, and I don't mean running around in a bad way, but running around doing what they do, like conducting life and health safety checks, responding to immediate needs like health and safety and things like that, how could you quickly capture, hey, this 100 homes over here is underwater. We know we're going to have to deal with that. Down the road, there's 200, et cetera, et cetera. The same thing when it comes to wind events, because obviously you could have debris everywhere, but it becomes, I'll use the derecho as an example. So you don't exactly know where all your damage is immediately, right? Because it was sort of a narrow path all across Houston. So thinking about how you get that information easily to assist and expedite your planning process and then into operations. So one of the first things we're going to see is that somebody would declare and submit a local state of disaster. And in this example, this is a declaration from the county judge, Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo. But in your community, it might be your mayor, and then up to a county judge, and then to the state. So the chief elected official of this jurisdiction has the responsibility to declare that local state of disaster, requesting and elevating the assistance up the chain. Then we get into the disaster summary outline, which should be done as soon as possible. I know that TDM helps to facilitate a lot of this in our communities, and they do a great job at that. So what it's asking is please elevate your damages and your summary of the disaster impact up the chain to the state as soon as possible. And John mentioned earlier, like, thinking about what our disaster funding thresholds and thresholds that we have to hit at the county level and at the state level. And in the county, it is in the counties around us, it is a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars to hit the first threshold. And then statewide, we're at like what, 52 million now? 50 something, 50.
53.4.
There you go.
Yep.
I knew you'd have it. 53.4. And so how do we get there, John? How do we get to $53.5 million?
Debris.
Yes.
Is a big way to get there,
Damage,
guys. I mean,
debris.
I don't know,
Yeah.
because it's uninsured loss, and that's a huge driver. I mean,
Right.
It is. It's getting this information up through the county and getting it to the state to have that data, because I mean, that is, you're going to hear after DSO, you're going to talk PSTAT, ISTAT, all these, again, new things you got to be more familiar with and working with your emergency management group, because getting that declaration process is no easy task. I mean, it's a lift. I mean, it really is.
Exactly. So back to that point, we need, it doesn't have to be exact, but we need some data to fall back on for potentially how many homes and businesses do we have damaged in our community, and what kind of costs can we derive from that, both in their, potential damage estimates from those structures, as well as the debris removal, because we know that the debris costs are going to be large, as well as your infrastructure costs, and getting that number up. So as fast as we can do that really helps expedite disaster declarations and funding back into your community. The next step up is the PSTAT, or the Public Assistance State of Texas Assessment Tool. And this is a mobile platform that you can use to capture storm-related damages to public infrastructure, which would be your facilities, your roadways, your parks, as well as debris removal and other FEMA-designated categories of work. So we've got the PSTAT and the ISTAT tools. And basically what we're trying to do is send that information up the chain. What I would tell you is, aside from using the tool, I think we are commonly using city and county resources that are driving around doing their emergency work. And I want you just to think about that, a good way to accurately, collect some of that information that you can, that your office could use to then complete these documents and get that information up. So it could be things like, I'm seeing a GIS tool used a lot now. I think it's Quick Capture. We've seen where that works well. You give everybody an app on the phone and have them kind of quickly mark, or count things that they see in the community, which could be used later. as well as maybe you develop a form or you develop, like I said, just something easy to help your staff out, because it is that early information that can really be used to help guide the other resources that you need. Survey 123 is another one. So PSTAT Survey 123 for local jurisdiction was designed for local officials and trained damage assessment teams to collect the information, severity, and costs. The tool is intended for local jurisdictions to provide direct access with various download options for tactical and strategic decision making. Tactical and strategic. All right. So what types of information do we want to collect? Both GIS or GPS location of the street address and the damaged property, dimensions, material, and size. Now keep in mind, we're talking about some detailed stuff that can apply to different types of infrastructure. So initially, just riding around out in the community doing like windshield type assessments, it would be good to kind of know regions of where damage is, or I would say broad types of information, like we know this zone or this community over here is heavily impacted, and you could always go back and try to get more detailed information like the exact street address, or maybe they're all underwater. We're seeing that from some of the events, the flooding in Texas that we talked about earlier, where you can't really get into those areas to count exactly how many, but if you know roughly where they are and can do some GIS analysis, you can gauge certain things. And then photos. So I don't know if it's on the next slide. No, it's not. Photos that are really good for doing this are like the timestamp apps, where you can add the address and even some lat long information. You can even include on portions of those photos like a little map by default. So you got people running around, they take a picture, then you've got the address and you've got an approximate location, which is very, very helpful. The ISTAT Survey 123, also this encourages citizens to report their damage to property, homes, and businesses using the ISTAT damage survey tool. So this is another piece of information that you can pull in, perhaps geographically or with some GIS assistance, but pull in that data to later use. So now you've got maybe self-reported information from your community. Some people also have people calling in, like call centers.
Yep, absolutely.
Or hotlines saying, hey, I've got damage, or I'm reporting that I have debris along with this. So my big picture, what I want you to think about is you may have public reported information coming to you, as well as what your teams or your own resources, and then eventually maybe what some of your contract support is, by helping you to paint that picture of the total damages in your community.
And I think the key here is data-driven decision-making. It's that now you have so many more, tools at your disposal and so many more data streams. Like, again, crowdsourced data, which is truly the 311s, the self-reporting. You have the ISTAT tool, you have crisis cleanup, you have your own team, and you have all these different layers, and you can even get some of the individual assistance and IA data of people who've requested assistance. So now you really have a 360-degree view of what the damages are, what impacts there are to your community. That coupled with visual inspections, you can do so much more now that can help you in the near term with debris operations, how many resources, how many yards, and then even in the future of what you need for long-term recovery and so on and so forth. So
yeah,
I mean,
so I think John, you're right. Huh?
That you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. No,
20 years ago.
Kind of looks like me.
Nick, I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the ISTAT. Luckily, I haven't had to deal with it. But how do people know to fill this out? I've never seen it before.
How do people know to fill this out? I see it usually as pushed from TDM at the state to county and city, and the counties and cities asking people, please report your damages. That's how I frequently have seen it. Now, I would take this into consideration. Not everybody out in the public wants to report their damage. So
Right.
it is a use. So all of these things combined together are useful decision-making tools. That's what John was really helping me to stress there. But again, it's different pieces of information. And we find that it's good to combine them all early because that will give you one of the best perspectives on what might be out there until you are a week or maybe 2 weeks in and you can say, hey, I counted and there's 500 homes. So think about it like this. The old school or years ago, the best way to do this would be to send somebody up in a helicopter, right? Which is still good. We still do that, you know? But you can't get your whole team in a helicopter, and usually it's like one or two people. And that doesn't really help you to count. It helps you to initially see what your immediate devastation is. But keep in mind, like with some of the flooding and stuff, you won't see that debris impact to your community maybe until, number one, water's gone down or they've had time to have resources like the VOADs or, you know, themselves clean out those homes.
I was meeting recently with a community that recently had, you know, their disaster, and they had a dashboard up. She had a dashboard up, and it was showing all the dots of the locations, and there was 4 quadrants. There was a data stream, and we're trying to find out how many homes were damaged or destroyed in this event. So you had ISTAT number here, you had your county engineering number there, you had your crisis cleanup number here.
Oh, that's cool.
And then in the bottom right, left quadrant, it was some other data stream, okay? None of those numbers matched, okay? Listen, were they in spitting distance? Yes, they were. And some of them, you know, you take the cities out, you take the city, but it gives you that ballpark estimate, rough order of magnitude. It gives me the areas.
Best available data.
Best available data. But I mean, yeah. And so I looked at it, I was like, yeah, okay. And then I'm sitting there, I'm going, and then to Nick, your point, well, then they got this certain amount of population that doesn't report, okay, because maybe they're well heeled, or maybe they don't trust the government, or they hadn't heard about it, or, you know, so on and so forth. And so I'm like, okay, that's probably I'll give it a 30% bump of number of damage. You know what I mean? Like that. I'm just kind of using. Yeah. I'm really good at cocktail napkin math, and
those are the best.
I do my best work with those right in front of me. Now, seriously though, that's kind of the ballpark estimating that you may have to do to understand, do I have 1,000 homes or do I have 10,000 homes? Because that right there is a really different event, especially with the windstorm like this.
Yeah, you know what else is important is that, think about it, in a big event, you're going to have multiple jurisdictions doing that.
For sure.
And like what we saw with the ice storm stuff is it took 3 or 4 months to get a federal declaration, because what's happening in the background is the state and then even FEMA validating costs. And these are the costs that we're talking about. So when everybody, you know, just if you can, the faster you can kind of pull together a picture, do some, like John said, rough calculations on damages and potential costs and send that up the chain is a really good strategy to helping us, particularly in this region where that dollar threshold is high.
Yeah, and it makes you seem like you know what you're doing too, okay? I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. Some of this is optics and, you know, oh my gosh, I've reported my damages and, you know, I've already got initial, you know, picture, common operating, whatever. It does, you know, versus, you know, at least you have a number. You have some sort of picture, and that helps ease everybody that you know what you're doing. Even if you're in the background, you got imposter syndrome, and you're like, holy cats, I don't know what, you know, I don't know what's going on here. But I know, you know, Nick, we do have a lot of different apps out there.
Yeah.
You know, some new tech.
Brian, did you get this picture? Is this from the timestamp app? The
one is from the.
Oh, no, the quick capture. Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. So this one actually has some kind of pre-populated images here about right-of-way and debris. And that's what we're saying is really good. Okay, here's another one that we didn't mention, drones. But nowadays, you know, there are really high-tech drones. There's also what I would call decent or great, but more affordable drones. And that can really help to just go out, deploy them into your community, kind of get you some quick, high-level views. No pun intended, but you know, bird's eye type stuff to see what's going on above ground.
Lee, you were going to make a comment or question?
How does our threshold compare to other regions of the country? The minimum dollar value?
Minimum dollar value of the rest of the country, we're number 2, I think, 2 or 3. I mean, it's a big number. It is. And Harris County leads the state right behind Dallas and Tarrant and Travis. You know, Galveston County's up there too. You know, and I should pull that up, and I will during the next, 5-minute break. But yeah, that 53.4 is, behind California. They're at 65, 68 million, but it's a big number. And I mean, that's why that strategy of a commonality between all these severe weather pattern over a period of time was important versus just a tropical event coming up the gut. And
yeah,
I mean,
what we've seen in talking about those previous things is it's harder for the smaller communities, but in Texas, to get to hit a high threshold.
It's impossible.
Yeah, that's why like the wildfires didn't make it.
Have you seen an area overestimate their damage?
Oh yeah.
I mean, and not meet the threshold when it was over?
Overestimate.
Oh yeah, that kind. No, they kind of. No, not really.
Yeah.
I've heard the stories that maybe some estimates were,
But that's why we say
that's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit too
That's why I
aggressive.
stressed best available data.
Yeah.
And napkin or hand, sometimes handwriting out your estimate, which we've had to do before, especially without a lot of power or whatnot. Yes, but yeah, quickly, and it really should be that. It's high. It's what you know or what you think you could have at the time.
And I'll tell you, FEMA has really, I don't want to, crackdown's not the right word, but they're certainly more active in the damage assessment process and really validating, verifying those data, doing the site visits, so on and so forth, before they, kind of release the hounds and make sure you are eligible for all those sorts of funding sources.
So moving on, part 6 is waterway debris
Waterways.
considerations. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's put the framework here. So obviously, we're talking about waterway debris removal from disaster events, and what we're obviously focusing on is debris that could be in our local waterways, which in the Houston-Galveston area is we have them around every corner, right? We have lots of waterways, and they're critical to us in terms of drainage. So they are necessary infrastructure, and we're talking about the programs that can help remove debris and hazardous debris from those areas post-disaster. So the first up is Texas Marine Debris Emergency Response Guide. This is a NOAA document actually that provides preparedness, response, and recovery guidance for waterway debris removal throughout the country. I think this one Brian found, and it's really good for the Texas environment, so that's a good resource. Whoa, we've got a lot on this screen. Brian, you're gonna have to help me out.
I can't catalog right there.
We need a whole nother hour for that.
This is my favorite. This was my favorite slide. I'll be
Real
honest with you.
simple. Yeah, here's a real simple graphic to help you in responding to a marine debris incident. No, I just threw this up there because this document.
Are we landing on the moon on this document right there?
know.
Just trying to
It
put
is-
up
it's
debris
kinda-
out of a canal.
It's kind of crazy looking, but no, it's actually it's not a big doc. It's like 18 pages, but actually they have some really good information in there. And so, yeah, you can go through all these yes and no and all that to try to find out what you need to do, but it really does kind of walk you through who's responsible, who has the jurisdiction in that particular area that you're looking at, who do you call,
I mean, all the information's there. So, I mean, it's a really helpful document if you're looking for, if you have an incident that affects the marine coastal areas like this.
Yeah.
What this tells me, Brian, is, and Nick, is if you have a waterway mission, don't jump into it on day 2 or day 1.5 or whatever.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I mean, that right there tells me you better get a group of people, some smart people. Don't do this alone. I mean, these are that had so many chutes and ladders on that deal right there. I mean, it took me about 2 minutes to find the start button on that thing. I mean, that is a lot, and I've done these missions before. That's about right.
Yeah. To break it down, I think a little bit, what we know and can reflect back on in this area is that Texas General Land Office will handle or lead debris removal and hazardous material stuff in the coastal and the inland waterways. So that's putting them in a bucket of agency response. And then we've got more of, I would say, channels and waterways that your community definitely maintains, your ditches or your channels that are not so much natural in nature, but definitely maintained by you guys, falls in sort of a different category. And then more of the natural stuff that nobody really maintains and may be regulated by the Corps of Engineers in a whole separate box. And in our experience, we've seen NRCS or the USDA NRCS service come in as a sponsor with money to help remove and rehabilitate those types of waterways as well.
They've been a great partner.
Yeah.
I think that's been one of the big changes. You talk about big changes in the industry over the last 10, 15 years. NRCS and the USDA EWP program, really, I mean, we've worked in Dickinson now because they had several grants in the state of Florida with the EWP program. So what has historically, again, in past history been maybe not as active, absent, so on and so forth, man, it's really been a positive change, especially as these waterway programs are just so complex that are out there, and really they are, and again, it's a new grant. I mean, not new. It's been around for many, many years, but a different grant program outside of FEMA and the public assistance program. So,
little more here on different agency capabilities and what you'll see if there is a lot of waterway debris. So like we talked about at the local level, you got your counties and your cities and navigation districts, and then you kind of move up the chain into the ports. So here we'd have Port of Houston, Port of Galveston, Port of Freeport, and what some of their capabilities are. So the more advanced you get more resources like on underwater surveying, debris detection, and agency coordination, and then back over into the state response. Obviously, there are some existing contracts that have all the bells and whistles and all of the full force capability that may be needed to respond and remove those hazards. Because think about it, at that level, you may have ships and navigational hazards and large debris that needs to be large debris and vessels that need to be taken care of. I know we saw a lot of that in the last big event over in Florida with tons of thousands and thousands of boats basically scattered everywhere and in the mangroves.
And you guys know, listen, if it touches water, it's going to be what? Expensive. I mean, that's break out another 1,000. Everybody says that. I mean, the acronym for boat. This is the same type of deal. It is complex. It is expensive. And there's some real danger out there. I mean, state of Florida spent tens of millions of dollars on these waterway missions out there. And obviously the permitting process, environmental reviews is a big part of this too.
Yes, so this graphic is actually from that guidance document, and it kind of runs through some of the compliance process. So things to look at are, can we fund this can we use federal funding to do this? So whether that's under FEMA, through the Stafford Act, or the NRCS like we talked about, and making sure, how do we address the environmental compliance related to that. So obviously, federal funding, the federal funding process sends us down sort of a different road and more stringent environmental through the NEPA process compared to just things that we might do locally. So for example, in both scenarios, coordinating with the Army Corps of Engineers in terms of regulatory guidance for working in those waterways. One example is it kind of varies amongst the core districts, but we're used to seeing that if you're just kind of picking up debris from waterways, that you don't necessarily need a very long and lengthy permit process. Where you're making some repairs, you might follow their nationwide permitting permits and limitations under kind of an easier thing to do. And then obviously if you're doing a lot of work or you're impacting a lot of wetlands and waters of the U.S., then you may be sent down a much more lengthy permit process. So one thing I'll tell you that's a really good resource is, especially in our area, is checking with the Army Corps of Engineers Galveston District. After an event, they will post a public notice for emergency permitting guidelines. So some of you may have, infrastructure that's in regulated waters, and that's very helpful.
So, okay, Nick. All right. Environmental stuff scares me. I know how difficult it is, and I know how you don't want to misstep, and it's so, I don't know. I mean, it requires smart people and to be a part of that.
Thank you.
Very welcome, very well. But seriously, I mean, I don't know, just what's the top
scary.
three
It's
things
scary.
to know? What are the top three? I mean, I'm just trying to
it is
simplify
scary
it for me here.
For a lot of people and a lot of entities that we work with. So top three is, number one, in waterways, we obviously have sensitive habitats. We have endangered species that may live in there as well, generally all across the Gulf Coast. So being aware of that, or making sure you ask those questions to these agencies when you don't know, is probably number one. Ask for help. When you don't know, just stop and ask, and someone will help you. Your contracting resources or the agencies that work in this space are there to help you. And I hope they're listening and they hear that from us and everybody in the room. The number two is, I would say, always be very careful in doing anything, whether it's land-based or water-based, when there are wetlands, or even if just a common knowledge of, hey, there's a wetland over here. Let's not go dragging a bunch of equipment through it without making sure that we protect or mitigate or have the right permit. And so your General Land Office and the Army Corps of Engineers offices, even locally here, I mean, they have people in the area in buildings that can help to review or come on site, and have those discussions with. I think another good one is the TCEQ. So if you think about it, we have stormwater discharge guidelines in just our normal, everyday municipal operations, right? Well, it's not really any different in a disaster scenario. So using things like best management practices in your work activities, the silt fence, or if you're working in waters like turbidity barriers, and contractors who do this type of work typically know what they need to deploy and to meet permit requirements. That's what you want to do, and just keeping in contact with them. I would say also, we are all used to, in these big disasters, seeing other agencies come in and they provide a service for another federal entity in terms of like inspection, compliance, and oversight. So the Corps of Engineers is a great example. In big debris removal operations, the Corps of Engineers comes in and provides feedback back to FEMA. They are the technical, what do you call it? Technical specialists for technical assistance.
The SMEs, they're the technical assistance contractors.
To check all of us to make sure debris removal is occurring the way it should, and they send their observations and inspections up the chain through FEMA, and then eventually back down to applicants. So anyway, a lot of oversight there on all of those things.
You know what I feel like with this is, I feel like you could end up in a Mayhem commercial. Y'all, you know about Mayhem? I mean, you remember the State Farm? Like, he's driving down the boat talking to that camera and about how he's going to clean up this waterway debris. And I really do feel like this could just go so wrong. And if you don't have these things and you don't have the technical resources, because Mayhem's just going to show up and take off a couple of mirrors and really do some bad stuff here. And I mean, I'm just trying to.
You know, another good example that's relevant to here is, since we're on the Gulf Coast, is beach debris and beach debris removal.
That's true, too.
And you guys know here we have that endangered turtle, the Kemp Ridley, that thankfully, you know, comes in and makes nests on our Texas beaches.
For
And
sure.
so that's an example if there's a lot of, you know, Galveston counties in the room. So when it comes to cleaning up our beaches, you know, that process would have to factor in the nesting and the habitat of that, the turtle and some other birds, I think, that are also on that list.
Right.
And so working around them and working with these
He's got a
agencies to
couple.
make sure.
Sunbirds,
some
just
birds.
a couple.
All right.
Jamaica Beach, just
All
a
right.
couple
No.
birds.
It's a couple of birds. The piping
Way
plover.
to downplay that one, Nick. Just a couple, three.
It's a snipe. There's a snipe and a piping plover.
Pipe and clover. Roofing.
Say it again. Roofer red knot. Now I will admit I did not know that one.
Didn't know that one.
Nope.
Is he new? Is he new to the list? Relatively new to the party.
You know,
There you go.
Another one in all our waterways that I know is on the verge is the alligator snapping turtle. So that's one that the state agencies want us to be very cognizant of, which is a really cool animal, right? Until you get
Lose
your
a
finger
finger.
close. Yes. Yeah, don't do that. But here's a real life example. So, you know, back to Florida and Hurricane Ian, they obviously had a lot of beach debris and working with their agencies there. And, you know, in some ways there's very similarities in state to state, and then you can have these examples where it's completely different. But they almost didn't want anything to happen on the beach because of a gopher tortoise and then sea turtles. So had to be special monitors for the sea turtles, and they didn't want anybody messing with a gopher tortoise burrow, which was in the sand dunes. So fun fact, there you go.
There you go. That's fun fact for the day.
Gopher tortoise. What is eligible for public assistance funding? So very cool picture, Brian. This is Waterway debris removal work in action. Where that boat is loading. He's got that crane and he's loading material, and you've got some observers and maybe even sensitive habitat or species documentation going on in that little boat as well. So must be a threat to life, public health, and safety. That's kind of a phrase we use across the board in a lot of different eligibility for debris removal. If it does not meet this criteria, it is not eligible, even if the incident is the region the debris is where it is. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's we've seen different, I guess, rubrics or litmus tests, if you will, applied to this. In some situations, it's distance from a bridge or other structure if it's in a river. We've seen the litmus test being distance from the high water mark or what have you. There's all sorts of, the 5-year flood being a big one as well. Understanding that the 5-year flood, which probably, if a 100-year flood comes every 2 years, a 5-year flood probably comes every 20 minutes. But you have to, there's certain, there's certain, again, litmus tests. It's the whole idea if a tree falls in the woods, are you going to pick it up type thing.
I don't think that's the...
Well, I mean, but you know what I mean. It's certainly, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, guys, but it is important when you are looking at the waterway debris, understanding applying a criteria and being reasonable with
So let's talk about what some of those criterias are. Okay, so as John kind of mentioned, one of the things you probably don't want to focus on early on is waterway debris, but eventually we'll get there. And so why would waterway debris be one of those things, threat to life, public health, and safety? Think about our drainage issues in your town or community, that maybe we've got a lot of debris that's stacked up and, and it's creating flow obstructions, navigational hazards, those kind of things if we have a lot of people.
Under the water, you mean?
Under the water as well.
Right.
Yeah. So going back, I'm just saying, going back to the things that maybe you said early on about the debris, like it's threatened, it's causing, hazards or varmints and mosquitoes and threat to emergency
Critters.
access, critters, that sort of thing.
Definitely critters.
Yes, ma'am. Aaron, we have a question in the
Yeah,
live
so
audience.
I just happened to be in Galveston Bay this last weekend, and there
Yeah.
was lots of, sunken boats. So were those declared not, I mean, maybe they didn't happen during some event, or are they not a hazard? I mean, they're just like randomly up there, so, I mean, what is the case? Like,
I think Lee Crowder needs to go pick
I'm
them
just
up.
curious.
The General Land Office.
That has to do, there's a lot of different things. It might be in a marina that is a privately owned marina. It could be General Land Office.
I think it could be just stolen and abandoned and not.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Derelict vessels.
Derelict vessels.
Yeah,
The General Land Office has a program for.
derelict vessels. They remove,
Yep.
I don't know, 2,000 a year or something. There's a program that's a standing program that's just derelict.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was wondering, if they were declared not a safety hazard for some reason, because they were sticking out enough that you could see them and go around them. But yeah, maybe it's a different situation.
Good
Yeah.
question. Good question.
Awesome. Moving on. So how do we prove or document eligibility here? So it's on the applicant to provide documentation showing, number one, legal responsibility. The second is the basis for the immediate threat determination, the location, types, and quantities of debris, demonstrating that the debris was deposited by the incident and wasn't pre-existing. So we've got a couple of graphics of some commonly used useful tools, like taking photos, even as we mentioned earlier, with different timestamp or quick capture type technology, but documenting what the waterway debris is before you work and then after. And so that's what those two photos left and right here show.
What's really important here is the fact that we are working in a reach that has a structure right there. So, it's that you could say, yeah, no kidding, Captain Obvious, but that when we're talking about what's eligible, obviously maintains improved property, so on and so forth, and being able to document that, hey, that reach or whatever, bayou reach,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, is adjacent to or abuts a residential property.
So in navigable waterways, for applicants that have a legal responsibility for maintenance, because keep in mind, you may not, somebody else or the Corps of Engineers may have some maintenance authority there. Debris that obstructs the passage of vessels is eligible to a maximum depth of 2 feet below the low tide draft of the largest vessel that was utilized in the waterway prior to the incident. So here I think our message is to know how deep and wide are some of the channels that our ship or even recreational boat traffic is commonly using. And looking back, if you have maintenance records of some of that, or even maintenance records for some of the maintenance activities, helps to document some of those conditions. And then if you don't, there's a lot of using surveys or even sonar technology to provide images of underwater to know maybe you accumulated a lot of sediment that needs to be removed, and continuing to do that throughout your waterway operation is another good example. So draft defined, draft is the vertical distance between the water line and the bottom of the hole with the thickness of the hole included. So there you go. Trees and waterways. So you may have a lot of downed trees, such as now actually in the Houston area, a lot of trees, and they they didn't discriminate amongst or against the waterways at all. So a lot of our waterways have the same type of damage that's in our roadway environments. So if a tree is still rooted to the embankment or is floating or submerged, the cost to cut the tree at the water's edge is eligible. And a little bit more on federally maintained navigable waterways. So the U.S. Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers may have specific authorities for removal of debris from those waterways, and not so much the local jurisdiction. So again, just knowing or having those discussions about federally maintained waterways in your community is helpful. Non-navigable waterways, this can include natural waterways or constructed channel, and flood control works. So we have some large flood control districts in the Houston-Harris County region, as well as some other drainage districts that are governmental entities that do have some of this responsibility.
So we're talking about, again, maybe it's a WCID or it's a
county drainage district.
All those things. Those programs are what we're talking about here. So, a DD6 in whatever county, all these non-traditional folks, this is who needs to be brought to the table if you are going to be dealing with this, because if it's a mud or soot, all these different levee districts, I know Fort Bend County has been very active historically in integrating their plans or actually bringing these folks to the table because they have so many. I don't know, Galveston County does too, Brazoria, all these areas have these types of groups. So you may need to be bringing them to your planning meetings or workshops or exercises when talking debris.
Yes. Debris is eligible for removal from non-navigable waterways if it obstructs or could obstruct your intake structures. That's a big one. So your inflow pipes, as well as your outflow or drainage pipes as well. But if it could also cause damage to the structure, such as bridges, culverts, I know John talked about this earlier. One example is we know that from the recent flood events from earlier this year through into April and May, in our region, there is a lot of water debris and sediment and trees and a mixture of both that is in the waterways and up against a lot of our major bridges and transportation infrastructure in the region. So those things that obviously cause or could cause flooding to improve public or private property during the occurrence of a 5-year flood does make those things eligible. And the NRCS, so we kind of talked about this earlier as a really good partner in this. They maintain the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, or EWP. And so throughout the country, we do see them step in and assist communities through this type of grant funding for eligible communities where there is debris or waterway restoration that is a need in the community. I know.
So EWP goes beyond, and it goes beyond just debris. You can see, when we've seen projects, tow walls, gaving baskets, a number of different types of enhancements or reconstruction to the different, reaches be integrated into the grant application. So, it's beyond just, hey, picking up sticks in the areas. It goes, much further than that into actual infrastructure itself. And the folks who are with EWP and NRCS are very good resources here within the state.
Yeah, and they've done a lot, I know, in the Houston area as well. So this program helps to provide that financial, and here's a really good point, the technical assistance. So they've got scientists and project managers that really provide that assistance to help improve our waterways by removing debris, funding those projects, could reshape and protect banks, levees, et cetera. And also debris from non-navigable waterways, so where we have less of that boat traffic and commercial infrastructure is eligible for applicants, even in streams where debris removal would also be eligible under the EWP unless the NRCS provides assistance. So that helps as well. And debris removal, lastly, debris removal from flood control works under the authority of the NRCS is not eligible. Brian, you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty clear there, what they cover and what they don't. So, you know,
It's making that evaluation and making sure that gets taken care of. So I know we got, the RIP program.
Yes, the RIP program. This is U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Rehabilitation and Inspection Program, which provides rehabilitation for flood risk reduction structures. Those might be, levees, channels, that sort of thing. So debris removal is eligible in that program for public assistance funding for flood control works throughout the RIP. The Army Corps of Engineers does not reimburse applicants for debris removal, but will conduct debris operations directly when necessary. So I think this is one where they come in and provide more of that work and less of the technical assistance.
Yeah, I think there's a FEMA guy over there that's just looking around going, send RIP.
Send RIP.
Send RIP. No, I mean, no, it is important. And again, just like anything, making sure that you have that coordination before you act. This is one of those, instances where it is better to ask for permission than forgiveness.
Yeah, so again, how do we know what's there, right? Because ultimately, you and us as the applicant in these communities where you're receiving this money, you're responsible for identifying the debris that is eligible or an immediate threat. So again, how to do that, the surveys, maintenance records, FEMA can provide funding if the applicant identifies an area of debris impacts, and this can include the use of side scan radar. Here's another example. We've seen a lot of this in even some of the local, like dredging, like Houston dredging type activities.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of pre and post surveys really help to document the amount of debris that has been removed. And then moving on to, do we need a break?
Wildfire. I think we're going to take a break. I got 11:25 on the official Apple Watch clock here. We're going to take a 5-minute break, come back at 11:30, and then we're going to wrap things up with the wildfire debris. Try to get you out of here on time, maybe a little early, we'll see. And but thanks for staying with us. You can run to the restrooms on the other side if you need, and we can go from there. There we go. All right, Wendy, thank you so much again for being here and being a part of this today. We're going to wrap things up with the wildfire. And again, I think it's really important because the fact of the matter is that they are just on my, John's disaster scale of, big debris issues. This one, I really feel like this one's gone number one. And I'll tell you why is just, again, just how bad it changes the face of that community. Just, again, much like you'd see a Cat 5 storm surge where everything's taken away, or a EF5 tornado where it rips the bark off of a tree. I mean, it's that level of bad. So I want to start out with the Maui wildfire. This was in the Lahaina area, historical area of Maui. Beautiful place. I've had a chance to go there. I've never been to Hawaii before this a couple months ago. And just an incredible culture, a incredible area. So many challenges that obviously in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's an island. Almost 1,400 homes destroyed. 250 to 300 commercial buildings. Again, those are other structures that were impacted. This happened in, I don't know if y'all remember that area. And, just seeing some of the videos, people jumping in the water and don't have time to evacuate. It was just incredible. And usually these events have a mosaic. That term is used quite a bit, where you look at one, not everybody's burned. There's shades of destroyed. This is really not that much. You really do have your mosaic is most everything was impacted. Yes, there'll be one or two standing structures, but very, very big issues there. So to date, almost 250,000 tons of debris was removed. What's important is that this was, this type of debris mission was mission assigned from FEMA to the Army Corps of Engineers. So this is one of those situations where, for the local government, it was too great. It was beyond that local government's expertise, control, and quite frankly, the Corps of Engineers has these contracts. They have the technical experts, and they began, I will say, several months after the disaster because of all the requests that were required, so on and so forth. Another big issue was establishing a debris management site. That took a while. You have a very concentrated area of West Maui that was impacted, and finding a debris management site that could cut down on transportation time, that route time to the debris management site, that was a big challenge. You had a lot of environmental issues. You had a lot of geographic areas, ingress, egress. You had a lot of those things that were impacted. In addition to the homes that were destroyed, you had a bunch of burnt trees and burnt automobiles. So much so that those automobiles created a halo on the asphalt itself, and now actually caused damage to the roadway because that fire was burning so hot. And now they're looking at also other infrastructure issues like the water lines in the area, because this supercharged liquid was going through those pipes and causing degradation and damage to occur. So really big challenge with this Maui event. Now today, so where they started was really in just a spot where they were looking for those resources and understanding what it was going to take. They're getting ready to do a multifamily dwelling debris removal. So through the multifamily, that commercial process, they're still conducting soil sampling because of the fact that there are contaminants that leach into the ground because of the wildfire. You've got geologist teams that are drilling into the groundwater to make sure there's no contaminants, along with arborists that are looking at those affected trees. Much like you saw in Galveston after Hurricane Ike with saltwater intrusion and those trees, you got a very similar type situation with some of these trees because they don't know they're dead yet. And just like some of the saltwater trees, they didn't know they were dead yet, but they were going to die. And so you have to bring, what's important here is, of all the technical experts that you need to engage with one of these big wildfire missions, arborists, geologists, you got soil sampling, you have the environmental folks, you got asbestos consultants that are out there to make sure safe and proper handling of that material. You have to, I'm trying to think, yeah, you got air monitoring because you don't want the pollutants in the air, the water testing. I'm trying to think of.
Hey, you're scaring me. Like, you said I was scaring you earlier. You're
no,
scaring me.
This one is. That's why we saved the best for last. No, I wanted to. Yeah, I mean, this is a whole build-up here, and what's important, it is scary when we are faced with that situation with the wildfire, that because we have such significant droughts, and what's important with this Maui wildfire is this was a very similar situation to 2011 with Bastrop County, because this wildfire was caused, well, I don't want to talk about causes because there's lawsuits going on, but it was the impacts were from a hurricane like 100 miles to the east of it, and it was those high winds that were whipping around that caused it and started the fire. with the electric company. What's that?
And I was saying, and some other stuff.
And some other stuff. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not being deposed here. We're just doing a workshop, and I want to kind of let you know that it definitely in those high wind days caused this. We've seen this a number of times with the California wildfires as well, but this one has so many nuances to it and so what they're doing now is they're removing all the debris and then adding almost like what's that? Black Star gravel, Black Star granite. You know, the little landscaping type of material. They're putting that cover on. In some cases, they're removing the slabs and they're able to start anew. And really, it is a wipe that lot clean. Actually digging down, and we'll get into this, but they're doing all of it there. So, hey. The reason why we're talking about it is that we are number one in number of wildfires. We had the second largest one in the U.S., and there's certainly, I mean, it is a serious risk for the state. And when you look at the number of homes with that are at risk, I mean, again, quadrupling what California being number one, but right up there in ranking third with 250,000 homes. And again, I think that, I mean, again, I would think there are a lot of homes, and could be more than that, that are at risk. So again, these wildland fires, what we've seen them, arcing wires, lack of maintenance on right-of-ways. So when you look at this from a mitigation perspective, working with, understanding what those fire risks are, understanding the July 4th holiday, observing the burn bans and so on and so forth are a big issue here. And will continue to cause those risks. So the BKI, or this is the wildfire risk map. This is a great resource to understand where you are when it comes to risk. From again, very low to low. It's a great resource and tool out there. And this is again some of the similar debris streams, but when you do have ash as a big issue, and really this is much more of a personal property type of mission. These wildfires, because of the type of devastation you get, we see a lot of these just going straight into a private property debris removal. You have some burnt metals, vehicles, specialized wastes, but again, it's a lot of a debris removal that is going to occur on that private property. So again, Smokehouse Creek here, 130 homes destroyed but again, just to look at the size of that thing, that's quite substantial. And that was, and Nick, that was over a couple of day period, 2 or 3 day period, and that thing moved just so quick.
Yeah, I think, I forget how many, I think at one point it was burning a section of land, which is 640 acres, like within a minute, like just completely wiping out. I remember reading that statistic. But the other thing to point out is that those two areas with the damaged homes were like 2 hours apart. So you just think about the resources that were up there. They were, you had to, how do I say this? It wasn't like you had great roads to go drive between towns, right? It'd take you 2 hours to go from both those pockets across. So Canadian was the east, and then like the Borger and Hutchinson County on the west. So very far apart.
And truly a big, again, that area pointing to Amarillo there, and Amarillo sod poodle country.
And emphasize
that could have been a huge risk.
The cattle, your last bullet.
Oh yeah, with 7,000 to 10,000 cattle. That area, again, known for its cattle. I think 1/4 of the nation's beef stock, or something very, very big, comes from that area. And again, I think that situation, it was not a government-led mission. It was more on the private sector side. So again, some resources out there. I want to highlight Firewise in communicating to individuals and areas, especially in that wildfire or wildland urban interface or WUI, that being able to be more of a Firewise community and reduce those risks of fires. There are organizations like After the Fire. They are now a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping communities with recovery and that long-term recovery out there. These are things we didn't have when Bastrop was. Again, I'm Bastrop County there. Again, the one that strikes me in my mind, 1,600 homes that was impacted there. We just didn't have the education and the information that's available. So there are steps to become a Firewise community and achieving that recognition. So you can see some of the steps here. Coming up with the action plan, one educational event, and a written wildfire assessment, and creating that site profile. And I think that, again, raising awareness of wildfire, especially in, again, timber country and in some of the other areas, can go a long way to impacting the area. So again, Firewise states, and this is off the Firewise website, right, Brian?
It is.
Okay. And do you have the ones that are here in the state of Texas? Was there any commonality? What was the big? Did you see anything, or what did you see when it came to those Firewise communities here within the state of Texas? I mean, you see there in the Northwest, just huge along the western United States, but again, a good swath there within the state of Texas.
Yeah, there are quite a few communities in the state of Texas that are involved. In particular, I saw quite a bit like in Montgomery County, like in the Woodlands and in those areas. There were some that were participating in the program.
Yeah, I actually was even talking to some communities up in the Vermont area. State director up there a little while ago saying that, hey, they're looking at wildfire as a greater hazard, and in some of their planning assumptions as well. So certainly a lot of wildfire mitigation measures for homeowners. I think that's where things start. And even what's interesting about the Maui recovery is they're now looking at how do we create more wildfire resistant material for their construction, whether it's more concrete walls, those fire retardant, fire resistant roofs. Those are the ones you did see still standing when they had defensible space and when they had those materials that prevented those wildfires from happening. I mean, honestly, when you think of Maui, you think of coconuts and pineapples and mangoes and all that sort of stuff. You don't think of wildfires. But certainly was an unseasonably dry year, and that was there. So, from our perspective, this is one of those things where there are a lot of technical resources that are required, and just a real big risk, again, higher order type stuff to get out there. Nick?
Hey, before I guess I'll start with the first question, because I'd like for you to expand on this one a little bit. But you talked a lot about the environmental requirements in the post-disaster work that happen or are happening in Maui, but have happened in other states. So what you said in Maui that's occurring, like with the sampling and all that, we know that that's like standard practice in California, Colorado, and it happened here in Bastrop. But my question to you is to help talk about what other things need to happen to help educate people in Texas on how to respond from those types of events should it happen again here?
I think the first thing is understanding the causes of the wildfire. And I say that because there have been 2 instances in the last 30 years where the actual government has caused the wildfire. The second one, and when I say government, I mean the Department of Interior, that were doing controlled burns of an area, and this is called Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon. That is an area in New Mexico, right north of beautiful Santa Fe, in Mora, New Mexico, and a couple of other areas to the northeast. And in that situation, again, I don't want to get too inside baseball or nerd out on this, but I'll tell you, it's important for you to know, because if the federal government starts a fire, they're responsible for cleaning up the fire as well. And that was actually, again, another mission through the Corps of Engineers, and a really big responsibility of not the local government. So not the state, not the local government, it was Corps of Engineers. And again, there's a whole claims processing thing, but from a debris perspective, that's important to know. Second thing is the environmental standards. If you are going to go onto people's property and do a private property mission, understanding what soil testing, how deep you can, remediate the dirt, if you can take their slab, where are you going to take the material? Are you going to have to do one of those burrito wrap things? The burrito wrap is kind of that industry term, or I don't know, maybe it's everybody's term.
Yeah.
Yeah, for any
encapsulating the
asbestos, where are you going to have to wet everything down and have a water truck there? Man, there are, like, this one, you got to find some resources. And I'll tell you, California has like almost that debris strike team now. They've done it so much that they have now been out to Maui, or they were sent into New Mexico. Like I said, there's over the last 10 years or so, we've definitely seen an uptick in wildfires, and understanding that everything that leads up, honestly, in this kind of type of situation, bringing that crew there to clean up the stuff, that is the easiest thing. I mean, you're going to have people in those Tyvek suits or marshmallow suits. I don't know whatever term you'd like to use, but you have to have those people. N95 respirator. You have to be fit tested. I mean, all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a lot different than just a
regular
normal
debris removal. Yeah.
What's that?
I said, different than regular.
Yeah, regular people debris removal. I mean, that's just like what we're seeing here with the derecho. This is definitely higher order stuff that is, and it's super expensive too. I mean, this could be $1 billion operation over in Maui. I mean, $1 billion with a B. I mean, that is a big dollar amount, and you want to make sure you're doing it right. Oh, and there are issues with human remains. There are issues with cultural significance, historical significance. This was not just in this fire, but in other wildfires as well, especially dealing with Native American lands is a big thing. And you have to have those cultural specialists on staff. I talked about technical people, asbestos people, and environmental folks. Cultural resource people, huge. Public information, oh man, there's a lot of misinformation out there after the fire. And I mean, I don't know if y'all followed all the conspiracy theories with Maui, but there are a lot out there. I don't know all of them, but there are a lot out there. You can see it on the X. And so anyways, that's stuff you got to deal with too. I mean, so it's bad. I mean, it certainly is. Sorry, I could drone on about this for a while, but I mean, it's really interesting. Any other questions?
Will the PowerPoint be sent to us?
Yes, it is. The PowerPoint's going to be sent. We'll send all that out. Sorry, who are we going to get it from?
So we will be posting the slides on the website as well as the recording. The recording may take a few days or a week, but yeah, we definitely will be posting both of those. We can send out an email to everybody. And I guess I can go ahead and do all my announcements right now.
Yes, please.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you to the Tetra Tech team for a great presentation, or great workshop this morning. I learned a lot, and thank you to everybody who came and participated online as well. Everybody, please, if you can, fill out those evaluations. Just a couple minutes. Hopefully it'll only take a couple minutes to fill that out. If you are online, I think Wendy posted the link, so you can just fill it out there and hit submit. If you're in person, we'll just pick it up from the table and put those ideas of what you want to hear about next time. Let's see. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we do have a webinar scheduled for July 10th. Apparently it's a Wednesday at 9 a.m. in the morning. And we are going to be talking about strategies for debris management challenges. So hopefully y'all can make it on July 10th. So you should have already gotten I think it was mentioned in the emails that you registered for this one. So I think you can go to that or just search on our website for
And
it.
that's just webinar. That's
is just
just
a
not
webinar.
in person, just webinar, and it's shorter.
It's 2 hours.
2 hours, 2 hours of fun, and we'll try to have better jokes next time and try to keep things informational as well.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Thanks, everybody.